Hello YouTube fans. Okay, so today we're going to cover a few things that I hope you'll find interesting. We're not just going to deal with drawing and animating in Krita, which is definitely something we're going to do, but we're also going to talk about, believe it or not, how to succeed. So this is a bit of a continuation of my answer to Rose Stone's comment/question about staying motivated. Okay? Before we talk about how to succeed in 3 steps that are very important to understand and to exercise or implement in your life and in your work and in your goals, before we talk about that, I want to share an interesting tip. It is my preference when animating in Krita to be able to see all layers all the time. And the way to accomplish that is don't create the layers here in the layer list. If you do it here, then you'll have to come over here and one by one add existing layers. And so the default behavior is whatever layer you click on is the only layer that shows in the timeline. Again, my preference would be to always be able to see all layers in the timeline, because it's really common for me to have things like a utility layer that I might copy a frame up to or something. You know, there's a lot of reasons why having multiple layers visible in the timeline at the same time is in my workflow pretty useful. So the way to do it is simple. You add your layers here. You put new layer. If you create your layer here and then you do need to jump over here to rename it, if you know you agree with me that naming your layers is generally good practice, then you know, the upshot is if you create the layers here in the timeline and then deal with any other housekeeping in your layer stack, then those layers will remain persistent in the timeline. Now, one thing to also be aware of is that, as you can see here, you can't have onion skins until there's some sort of, until the layer knows that it has animation data involved. So another good practice is the minute you've created a layer, just go ahead and hit the insert key. So there's at least one keyframe right at the beginning, and then from then on, when you make changes, you'll be able to automatically generate keyframes as you go. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take this sketch from yesterday, and what we're going to do is first let's have a step where we tighten up the pencils to make it into a more proper pencil test that will be a better guide for the ink work. Reason being that I have a proclivity to get in a hurry and go straight from the pencil test to ink. And sometimes I find I lie to myself a bit, and I think that I've got a firmer plan than I actually do. And I get to the inking stage and find out that I didn't quite work this out or that out. So I'm thinking today it's probably good to take an intermediate step of tightening up the pencil test. Now, if you're coming to this video blind as a bat and aren't familiar with what we're even doing here, let me take maybe 15 seconds to show you. So what we're working on is this anime right here, and by the way, sadly enough, this shot that I really liked is going to have to be redone, because it turns out there's some things about the acting. I love the animation. I think it flows really nicely. It's well conceived, but it's a little bit contrary to the character of this guy Zen. What he really should be doing is going like this and just kind of stretching and preparing for the battle in a very nonchalant way, not let's say peacocking, you know, to intimidate the other guy. He's not intimidated at all by the other guy. This is just a walk in the park for Zen. So anyway, so the next shot after this is this one right here, where he hauls back and inadvertently clocks Akari before clocking ninja number one. I'm not going to like throw away and destroy this shot because it's possible it'll get cut into the show, but the likelihood is that it won't. Okay. So as we get busy on this, I'm going to literally try to do two things at the same time, which is talk about this success algorithm. These 3 points, count them, 3. And try to do the pencil test at the same time. Is that an exercise in futility? Am I insane to even be trying this? Probably, but maybe not. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, first of all, is I'm going to try to be cognizant of which layers are going to be holds that are static shots that are going to continue without changing underneath of other things that are changing, which means I'm going to treat my pencils the way I would treat my ink, which is go ahead and try to intelligently break things into layers in appropriate places. So what's the first success rule that I'm going to relate today? It is that whatever it is that you want to accomplish as an artist, as an animator, as a business person, whatever. And by the way, this stuff is from experience. I mean, I've been running my own business since 1991, so kind of seen a few things come and go. Number one is adopt the attitude that you have no choice, that failure is not an option. Now, that may not be a real, that's an easy thing to say, and you can envision the drill sergeant who's failure is not an option, that kind of thing. The reason I say that is that if you try to accomplish whatever, could be anything, there is a difference between being determined and having reached the point where failure is not an option. And I experienced that in my own life where I was trying to get my own business off the ground back in the day. And I actually poked at it while working another job for about 6 months, 5-6 months. And I couldn't help noticing that it was, and the job I was working started to peter out. It was a door-to-door sales job, actually, which is in itself somewhat challenging. But I was doing okay with it. But there was a point in time where my ability to earn the kind of commissions I was earning when I started began to fizzle. And I realized that job wasn't going to work for me. Well, in tandem with this job that was kind of paying the bills, I was also trying to develop my own business, which involved me literally getting on the phone and telemarketing businesses, cold calling them. So my point here is that it actually was not until I reached this point where the other job was fizzling out and I just reached a decision point that for me, I was so determined that I was going to have my own business and all that sort of thing, that I just crossed that point where you say, I have to make this work. I am going to make this work. If it kills me, I'm going to find a way. And I'm not going to quit until I'm starting to get whatever, my measure of success is. And interestingly enough, once I reached that decision point, that's when I started popping sales, and I was able to reach the point where I realized, okay, this can work. I can be successful. And by the way, I'll say parenthetically that the pattern I've seen in business is that it takes you, if you're trying to do something really difficult, it'll take you 2 hours to get discouraged. You're immediately going to be challenged. The universe will test you to see if you're really committed to doing this thing that you want to do. Couple hours. It takes a couple weeks to start to get some signs that success might be possible, that this might work. Maybe this is going to happen. Maybe I can do this. It takes about 2 months, and this is mostly in relation to cold call selling, just selling, getting the numbers. It takes about 2 months to reach the point where you go, you know what, I'm starting to get some good responses. I've made a couple sales. I believe this is going to work. So 2 weeks to think maybe it could work. 2 months to go, yeah, this is going to work. I can do this. And 2 years to reach the point where you go, you know, we're going to be fine. You know, don't have to worry about paying my bills. Pretty sure I'm going to be always able to create opportunities for myself. You know, you develop this confidence that you can do this thing and that you're going to be okay in life because you've sort of paid the price and you get to that point, right? Okay, so I got a little issue here with Mr. Ninja's foot. Okay. But if you adopt the attitude out of the gate that failure is not an option, that you literally have no choice, you must find a way, that psychologically puts you in the place where you've sort of bypassed the learning process of getting to that point. If you can immediately dive right in with that attitude, that will guide your steps more intelligently as you deal with all the things that you're going to have to face in order to craft some sort of life, success, career for yourself. So that's step one, is to, in other words, if you're going to succeed, no matter what, you're going to get at that point. You will reach that point where for you, going backwards really isn't an option for you. It's just a question of how you reach that point and when you reach that point. And that's pretty obvious. I mean, that's like saying that, how do you know somebody failed? Well, they didn't succeed. It's kind of binary, you know. So I'm saying that everybody I've ever known who was successful ultimately reached that decision point at some point in the process, where they said, "By gum, I'm going to do this if it kills me," you know, kind of thing. That doesn't mean that you can't run into barriers that are so egregious and so powerful that you ultimately fail. It can happen. However, that brings us to point number two. Point number two is to define a failure metric. What do I mean by that? Well, I look at Elon Musk as a good example. The thing is, when you're talking about being successful, it's really, really tempting to have an attitude of, well, if you say failure is not an option, it's a little bit of a dangerous thing, because now you feel bad if you look at your situation, you sort of sense that maybe failure is in fact looming on the horizon, and you know, we might be in trouble here. And I mention Elon Musk because in his businesses, he doesn't take the attitude that it's not that failure is not an option. Okay, so point number one is about being absolutely, the way I visualize it is this: you're in a war and you're in a valley, and up in the mountains all around you you're literally surrounded. So in other words, if you can get yourself psychologically into the mindset where you say, if I don't succeed, I will die, that's the attitude that propels you forward. But then the next couple steps are also important. So what's step two? Step two would be to define a specific failure metric. Meaning, it is okay to fail, actually, but it's critically important that you define specifically what the situation and circumstances will be to trigger you to say, okay, that's it. This did not work. We need to cut our losses and move on. Maybe try something else or whatever it is. And I think that's critically important, because if you don't define a specific failure metric, then what's going to happen is, as I said, you're gonna venture into this world that you're trying to conquer, whatever it is. And you know, as I said, within 2 hours, the universe will test you. It'll test you. Something will go wrong to see if you're actually committed to this thing that you want to do. And so feeling bad or feeling discouraged is not a good failure metric, because oftentimes those setbacks are the very things that are there to test you to see if you have what it takes to sort of get past that, and whether, I hate to put it this way, but in a sense it is correct, is whether you deserve to succeed. Again, I hate to say that because now we're going to argue about the whole problem of deservedness and all that, and so take it with a grain of salt in the light in which it's intended. I'm trying to help you face reality. You are going to be tested. Whatever it is you want to accomplish, you will be tested. And the first test that everybody gets, and a really common place where people quit, is when something goes wrong and now they're emotionally questioning the goal, all these sorts of mind games we play because we're bummed out that things didn't go as we hoped they would. So setbacks like that are a really crappy failure metric. Really crappy. Because, let's see here. Oh, I guess I need to erase this as well. So it could be you run out of money. There could be a lot of things that are your failure metric, but it's okay to have one, is my point. It's okay to have a time and a place and a situation where we go, okay, this didn't work. Time to cut our losses and go home and or maybe try something else. Okay? So now you're kind of off the hook psychologically. This isn't about how you feel today. Now, one caveat. If you get into it and you decide, for whatever reason, I guess I really didn't want to do this after all, that's fine. It's perfectly okay to change your mind. Okay? But we're talking about somebody who's kind of desperate to maybe write their own ticket or be their own boss, this sort of thing. For that person, you do need to adopt this attitude that failure is not an option, because that gives you the drive where your goal is bigger than the things that are going to try to set you back. That's the whole point. You're trying to have a mindset that when the setbacks happen, you say, I don't care. I don't care. I'm going to fight through this. I'm going to win. I'm going to succeed. And you don't quit because you've defined your failure metric. I think it's safe to say that not one person in 1,000 who says they have a goal take the step of defining their failure metric so that they know in advance when it's okay to quit. Now, it's easy if you're an employee because your employer says, well, you're just going to do what you do, and this is what I'm paying you to do, and then you do it. If it helps you to think of it that way, and you're your own employer, okay, fine. Think of it that way, if that helps you. So whatever your goal is, you have this attitude of you're being surrounded by enemies and you have no choice but to succeed, and you know what your failure metric is, so you know when it's okay to cut your losses and quit. Step 3 is, it's one of these 80-20 rule things. Define the specific tasks without which failure is certain. Okay? And then give the most attention to that. So if you want to be an animator, you probably need to be drawing. Okay? Now, the more quintessential example I have experience in my life is knowing other people that were doing telephone sales, including people that I hired to do telephone sales. And in my experience, there was always, actually I'm going to delete this key so that I can leverage the prior key and just change the hand position. Okay, so when I would hire these people to do sales calls, you could simply how many calls did they make? Did they dial the phone? That's it. I mean, it's literally that simple, because actually if you're selling a reasonably well-targeted product or service, and you have a reasonably well-conceived telemarketing script, because you're doing, you're on the phone. That's, that's my experience. It's telemarketing. So when it comes to like modern social media marketing and advertising, I'm not the guy to ask for advice because I don't do it. I don't enjoy it. I have no interest in it at this point. That may change, But at this point, I couldn't care less. I've never advertised ever. I've never waited for people to come in the door or call me. I've never done that. I've always gone out and drummed up the business by making calls. And so I got pretty good at writing a telemarketing script that allows you to get someone to be willing to engage with you for at least 60 seconds. And the simplest way to do that is to say, hey, I got an idea I want to run past you. I promise it'll only take 60 seconds. If it makes sense for you, let's talk about it. If not, I'll let you get back to work. I mean, that's a great, really non-threatening way to get somebody to at least listen to what you have to say. And if what you have to say is compelling, then they're not going to have a problem continuing that conversation. Okay, so that's my experience. I come from a telemarketing paradigm. And I'm not talking about the kind of telemarketing everybody hates, where you're a consumer at home and you're getting people calling you about, whatever. Back in the day, it was about long distance service or, whatever. I'm talking about business to business sales that is done on the phone. Okay. So in that arena, there's really only one thing. Because what you find is, this is something a lot of people don't know, is that you can have people with varying levels of skill as a salesperson. Some people are very outgoing and this sort of thing. And most people will say, oh, I would hate to do that. I couldn't do that. Well, what you discover is that it actually does not matter much at all what somebody's personality is. What you actually find is that the people who make the calls make sales, and the people who don't. Doesn't matter who they are. I've known people who were very unlikely, who were quite successful, and the only difference between the ones who were successful and not is the ones that were successful they dialed the phone, and they battled through the script. They got comfortable with it, even though at first it was very uncomfortable. So let's see here. So if I was a really great YouTuber, I would probably be writing all these things down, and I'd probably put them in the thumbnail for the video and all this sort of thing. And I don't know at this point if I'm going to. But okay, so I want to do a new layer, and this layer is going to be Akari pencil. Okay, because I want my animation of Mr. Ninja Guy to simply hold now. He's going to make his quick move, and now he doesn't ever change, so it's all going to be Akari. And at this point, the likelihood is I'm going to be able to draw Akari once and just animate her. I don't even know. I might animate her hair flowing a little bit in reaction, secondary dynamics kind of thing. But so step one, adopt the attitude that you're surrounded by enemies and you truly have no choice but to succeed. That is super, super helpful. Super, super important. And again, I want to emphasize, I don't know anyone who's ever succeeded in business that didn't reach that point. And everybody I know who ever failed in business and complains today about how hard it is and all the rest is somebody who ran into roadblocks and quit. And that doesn't mean that there aren't situations where the roadblocks are so egregious and so powerful that it makes sense to quit, because there are. All I'm saying is that in the real world, most people actually quit way, way earlier than they needed to. So if you're the person who has a true situation that was just so difficult that nobody could have done it, then okay, I feel bad for you, and it could be that you are that person. And I'm not judging you or maligning you. All I'm saying is that in my experience, this is what I've seen. Take it for what it's worth. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think I'm going to leave that and go ahead and draw. Well, gosh, I probably should. Let's see. She's going to go over to here, and she's only got 3 keys. So yeah, all right, that's fine. So let's. Question. What did I do wrong here? I'm in the Akari pencils layer. Okay. Oh, I see. I didn't insert a key, so I need to go Control Insert so that there's a key in there. And in point of fact, okay, that's interesting. This key should be dragged to here, here, and here. And this is purely a matter of animating her head. Once I get this in place, then it'll be pretty quick and easy to go ahead and go forward with Zen. So, and I believe when I did the pencils, I actually raised the size of her head a little bit on each of these keys, so it looks like she's moving a little bit toward the camera. Okay, so now we see some keys here, and those are probably Zen. Yes, you see Zen move there, so now we know we need to do a layer for Zen. Okay. Now this is kind of an interesting thing about doing pencils. You could argue that since we know Mr. Ninja, it doesn't move at all through the rest of the shot, and Akari's done moving too, why don't we just hit Control E and bake this down? So now all the pencils are in one layer, but we have tight pencils instead of sketchy pencils, and once we get Zen done, we'll be able to go ahead and bake them all together and then go to ink. So let's add a new layer, and we'll call this Zen Pencils, and we'll just hit the insert key. So we have a key, and we need to draw his initial pose. The thing I was debating earlier is the fact that the Akari layer would probably be easier if it had some opacity to it. So why don't we do this? Actually, here's an idea. Why don't we turn off this layer, and in this layer we'll take a gray color. Let's see. Okay, this kind of sort of might be a waste of time, but alright, so B key in behind mode, and I'm gonna actually, I guess I can leave that layer on, but what I'm trying to do here is just, I want to create some opacity so that just very quickly and very roughly, I'm doing it in behind mode so that it's behind the pencil lines, obviously, and then that way at least we're blocking Zen. So I don't need to cover the ninja. That doesn't matter. I just need to cover Akari real quick. It doesn't have to be tight and clean. It can just be rough. If I was smart, I would have done this when I drew her the first time, so that when I copied and pasted her, it would always be the color would be going with it. But at least this way she's covering up Zen, and so we're not going to be, so at least we have the ability to turn off the sketch layer for one thing, because of all the scribbly lines. It'd be nice to sort of get rid of them if we can. Okay, so there's that. Okay, that's cool. Okay, so now we'll go to Zen Pencils, and boom. So do you remember your 3 steps? A, adopt the attitude that you have no choice. And if you don't know how to do that, my advice is envision yourself in a valley surrounded by enemies that are all going to kill you if you don't succeed at whatever you're going to do. That's step 1. Step 2, what's going on here? Pencil. Pencil. What am I missing? I'm missing something here. Oh, I see. Duh. It's a color. Duh. That was stupid. Okay. So now we really need to put this under, obviously, so that he's actually covered. Okay, so by the way, I forgot about Akari's hand. But her hand doesn't move, so therefore we can bake that hand into the Zen layer. That would be fine. So let's just kind of draw the hand like this. Okay. So yeah, step 2 is so important, is define your failure metric. Do like Elon Musk and decide in advance if we run out of money to this level, decide exactly when it's okay to quit, because that way you're going to not quit prematurely. Why? Because I'm arguing that most of the time when people fail, it's actually because they just quit prematurely. Not always. I'm not saying that's always the case. I'm not saying that success is equally available to everyone and that there aren't some real disadvantages or challenges out there that are really real, that make it really hard or even impossible in some cases. Depends on what country you're in, blah, blah, blah. But I am suggesting that because it is endemic to human nature to get discouraged and quit, that usually when people quit, they didn't actually have to. They just, it's usually more emotionally driven than logistically driven. So it's important to have that failure metric. And that kind of lets you off the hook, because it's good to know that there is a time when it's perfectly okay to say, you know what, we're done. We're quitting. But you don't want to do it earlier than you should. Okay, so now I think what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put the sketch on top, and what the heck, I'll lock the layer just so I can kind of... Okay, so it looks to me, I want to turn this off for a minute and see. Yeah, so it looks to me like Zen moves forward and then he hauls back. Okay, so there's definitely some stuff going on here with his with his shoulders. Okay, so let's go back to this drawing and let's turn off this layer, because obviously she moves out from under him, and so I want to at least have him blocked in so that when she moves out of the way, his body reappears. So it doesn't matter what it is you're trying to accomplish. These things tend to hold true no matter who you are. Okay, so I'm going to insert a key here, and I'm choosing at this point to do this okay, interesting question here. In the sketch layer, I'm seeing two keys right in a row. I don't know if I accidentally created that somehow a moment ago, but I'm going to turn these layers off just so I can see what's going on there. Okay, that's an erroneous duplicate. Remove that keyframe. Yeah, that was an erroneous duplicate. So, okay. So now we're back to the Zen pencils, and by putting in those keys, I'm not distracted by the prior drawing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the comma and the period key, which, by the way, those are hotkeys I set up in Krita just to match what I was used to in OpenTunes. And so the way you would do that is in Krita you would go settings, I believe it's configure Krita, and am I wrong here? Oh, shortcuts, it's right there, keyboard shortcuts. And I think what I did was I searched for next, yes, next frame or next keyframe, and previous keyframe, and I just set those to plus and comma. Okay. No, I don't like that. I'm just gonna delete that. Boom. So I hope, sorry folks, I hope those ideas are helpful to you. I'm assuming there's probably a lot of people who, are in the creative arena that would like to know, how do I monetize this, if you will. I don't look at YouTube as being my primary source of monetization. Frankly, I don't look at animation as being a source of monetization at all. Actually, at this point, it's not. It's something that I'm developing, that once I feel comfortable that I'm at a certain point, and we're getting there. We're getting there. I mean, I alluded to it in a video, I think yesterday or the day before, that we are close to releasing Act 1, Episode 1, Act 1 here on YouTube, and just see if it gets some traction. But we've got to do the soundtrack and stuff before we can do that, so there's still plenty of work to do. But okay, there we go. Let's just tighten up the old anatomy here. So everything doesn't have to be done yesterday. In fact, it's nice when you can be a little more patient and make plans. And life is hard when everything's a panic. That's why I encourage people to, if you can, stay out of, don't be deep in debt or over leveraged, that sort of stuff, because it just makes life harder when you're having trouble getting along, paying your bills or whatever. Just really better to avoid that if you can. Not saying you always can, but I am saying that you often can. Okay, so now, yes. So this is sort of a quintessential case. We've got some keys in here that were very much just sketched. And so I'm going to go ahead and put these. Actually, I am not going to put these keys in here. Actually, there's a place right here, starting here, where I am not going to put these keys in here, because there's only going to be one drawing of a Kari, and it's going to be just repeated and moved a little bit. So what I am going to do, however, is go to the Type Pencils layer. Okay, so here's where I ran into a problem. But that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to insert a key like so. Because at this point, I don't care if my Ninja gets erased, because I know that when I ink it, there's only going to be 3 keys, and then it's just going to repeat, and I'll probably just hide the layer during most of the ink work anyway, because there's no reason I need to see it. The problem that we have right now is that we do have this drawing, which is really sketchy. So one question I need to ask myself is, does it belong in there at all? I'm going to put it in there just because. I can always take it back out. So now, dealing with this anatomy, one thing I'm going to do also is try to use more straight lines. One thing you find in drawing is curves are the bane of the artist. That's a strong statement, but what I mean by that is if you try to draw things round and organically, it's actually harder to do things well and accurately. What I find is that you're actually better off, in many cases, to focus on contours, with straight lines. And then you can always, like a bicep like this, if you drew a bicep like that, you can always come back and smooth it out, right? No problem. But as far as drawing accurately, a big part of the challenge is simply either seeing what you're looking at or seeing in your imagination accurately, and then putting the lines in the right place. And that tends to be easier working with straight lines than with curves. Okay, so now I'm not sure I like this. In fact, I'm pretty sure I don't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to super foreshorten this like so. Boom. Yeah, I like that better. Okay, so let's go to the next key. Well, actually, no, let's not go to the next key. Let's make sure that we're not forgetting about this guy's head. What time is it? Okay, I got a. It's about almost noon. I got some stuff I got to do at 12:30. So, okay. So here, let's go to the sketch and bring it down the opacity again, just so it's not being such a distraction. And now there's just basically been this change in orientation with Zen's head, right? So, and here we have a tremendously foreshortened. I mean, that's his elbow right there. And the whole point is that he's bonking Akari pretty hard. He didn't mean to, but he did. Okay, so let's just get these contours in here. Alright, and then we'll go ahead and put Akari in this layer. It's going to wind up being married to the other layer, no matter what. So, Akari, square jaw. I'm going to go ahead and put in these in a very characterized anime manner. Remember, this only lasts 2 frames. So I'm trying to put a lot of motion in here. And there's her shoulder. And so now this is kind of the important thing. He's got to shift his weight properly as his hand goes back, and he really clocks her good. Okay, importantly, Zen's pose needs to be pretty solid. I mean, we need to be really making sure this drawing is what we want it to be, because it's going to be held for quite a long time while Akari fades out of the shot. Okay, so I'm just going to sketch in here, sort of imagining where his arm would be. Yeah, that's not horrible. Okay, so now we're just going to have a couple frames here that are going to be kind of fun. Right? And then this shot's going to be pretty important. I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a copy so that I can just take her out of it and see what the sketch was. And I believe, yeah, see, that's the drawing that's going to sustain through the subsequent sequence of keyframes. So same thing here, where how I'm choosing to draw Akari is pretty important, because we're going to be seeing her as she falls out of frame. Get the chin point correct. She's got that square jaw. And a little modification here. I think that when I do the ink, yeah, what I'll do is right around here, I'll go ahead and pivot her shoulder around. So her shoulder is going to go this way, but for now I can just make a note of that. And okay, so now because this is a hold here, I want to go ahead and make sure I get Zen's position straight. As far as I can tell, he would be looking, his eyes are like here on the other side of his head, so he's still looking at this guy. So we would see some indication of his ears. And then what I think I want to do here is let's go ahead and add a keyframe. Let's just do an insert keyframe. That way we've got the, okay, so we've got the other stuff from the sketch layer, and Zen's going to be sustained without changing up to here. So on this key we want to go ahead and insert a new key, and the only thing we're going to draw is Zen's change in position. Okay, so I'm not even going to refer to the previous drawing of Zen. I'm just going to try to, you know, use my basic drawing ability to sketch this in, hopefully reasonably well. Okay, so no, that's not too bad. Same thing here in the sense that we're on 2s, so yeah. So does his body move much? It does a little bit, so now I'm going to do some toggling back and forth to just get the animation in there. Okay, I'm not one who's super big on onion skins as a methodology for knowing where you've been. I prefer to just toggle back and forth. That's just a matter of personal preference. And again, the main thing I'm trying to establish here is the character of Zen's expression. That's really the important thing here. And this is only two frames, so this one, yeah, I don't want to do that with his mouth. Sorry about that. So it's this drawing that's actually really important. And it's this drawing where Zen's expression is kind of funny when I played back the pencil test yesterday, because I really saw it as a success, frankly, because I didn't really do too much to work out the timing. I was really flying by the seat of my pants. And yeah, it came out, you know, pretty close to what I would have wanted, so I was pretty happy with that. So here, this is the thing that's really important. Now we'll just get his body in there as a guide, you know, because it needs to be in there. But basically, getting the progression toward this expression right was kind of the big goal here. Okay, so now we should be able to obviously save early, save often, and let's pull back to here. Let's have a peek. Not bad. Yeah, so I kind of feel like I drew the stuff that needed to be drawn. There's obviously some stuff that's going to have to be filled in, but for the most part, I would say at this point that I can go to the inking stage and expect it to be right. So I am going to bake it down, baby. Bake it down. And I'm going to do the same thing again here. Just lighten this up, which works a little better now since we've got bolder lines. And so what I think I will do now is the same thing I did before, which is my plan would be to draw Mr. Ninja. Actually, I should not create keyframes here. I need to create this keyframe and then duplicate it so that I can save myself having to repeatedly draw his legs. So look, we're at 50 minutes, so hopefully this video has been useful to you, and rather than finish the ink now in this video, I'm going to go ahead and finish the ink in the next video because I have a few other bits of stuff that I need to take care of. But as you guys know, there will be more later.